People say there is a first time for everything. A first kiss, your first car, the unrequited first love. However, what does this mean in the grand scope of things? Are firsts more monumental because they are the first, or do we get better with practice? Do we remember our firsts as more important than they actually were, holding on to that magical moment as a mark of our past and future selves? Do our firsts outshine what comes next? On A First Time for Everything, we will explore with our guests their firsts and how those impacted the seconds, thirds, and even countless times after. Is the first the best or merely the beginning? Or worse, was the first the last because it was so bad? We will dig into the recesses of our memories and consider whether or not a first was the start of something amazing or something we'd rather not remember. Come along with me, Juliet Rose, as I put our guests in the hot seat to analyze their firsts and how they defined who they became. I promise you're in for a fun, although maybe bumpy ride. Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of First Time for Everything on the Go Indie Now Network. I am your host, Juliet Rose. We just want to remind everyone to send a star to let our hosts and producers know how much you appreciate what we're doing here at Go Indie Now. Every time you contribute, you get entered into our season prize package drawing with gift cards, swag, and more. And tonight we are welcoming kind of a special guest. I'll just put this out there right off the bat. DZ Hall is my husband. He is also a writer. We are running into a little technical difficulties because we're both on the same internet. So there might be some delays here and there. Just bear with us a little bit. And DZ, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself, what you write, and kind of who you are?
Thanks. Well, I used to write under my real name. I put a couple books out like that, kind of folklore, slight slasher horror. And then writing a slasher, I realized I wanted to get darker, and that's where DZ Hollow came from. Originally, DZ was going to be teen, writing like teen, young adult stuff, and I realized it always gets way dark. So then it became a pen name for extreme horror and really just any horror I do at this point. So the first story of mine is actually coming out Friday. I sent out some ARCs. It's way different than anything I've else have written, kind of more fun and quirky. But a lot of my stuff kind of gets into, I have cerebral palsy, so getting into characters with disabilities and people just sort of in unfortunate situations, hopefully getting revenge, maybe not all the time.
Yeah, definitely. So let's talk a little bit about that. Did you always know that you wanted to write, or is this something that you came to later in life?
I started writing at 13. That's when I wrote the first story. My dad gave me his old computer that he had. He worked from home and he worked for Fujitsu. I think if anybody knows that, it's old Asian computer company. But yeah, he worked for them, and he gave me his first laptop that he had when they gave him his second one. This was in 1997 or 98. So really just becoming new. And I remember reading Michael Crichton's Sphere. So I was like, I wanted to write something like underwater, like submarine horror. So I did that, wrote another story that was kind of like slashery, I guess, about a kid with a hook. And I've actually rewritten that one now. I've been sitting on it for a while, but I did rewrite that because that was one of the first stories I remember rewriting. So yeah, I mean, it was always something that I liked doing. I just always liked telling stories. And being creative, and writing was obviously something I just kind of jumped into because I had the means, fortunately. And from there, it kind of was always something. I stepped away from it, but then in school, you're kind of always doing it. Teachers always pointed it out, always liked what I had. Called my parents to say how much of a nuisance I was, but to also read things that I wrote. So I had really good teachers, and I think they kind of helped me see that was something I could do.
Yeah, so I know that, you write a lot of fiction that deals with disabilities and disabled characters. And why don't you talk a little bit about that, why you do, and kind of your own personal history?
Yeah, definitely. So yeah, I have cerebral palsy. That means I was born like that, 3.5 months premature. Spent those first 3 months of my life in an incubator. Mom and dad had to get in the car, drive to visit me, and I was just tiny. I mean, fit in the palm of my hand. My dad's hand. The picture of me, I was, under a pound. It doesn't even look real. So they didn't really know what they were in for. They were just kind of handed this baby and told, he might not walk. He's probably not gonna, talk either. You may feed him through a tube for the rest of his life. And I didn't walk till I was 2. I was talking well before that, and so yeah, I mean, it's been my life. I was always the only kid in school with CP. I was the only kid in school that had a obvious disability that wasn't in a special ed class. So I always stood out, whether it was sports, whatever it was. So I know what it's like to kind of be the outsider. And let's face it, we just don't have a lot of that representation in Hollywood. I mean, a little bit, we see it, but it's very rarely do you have I mean, I can't think of something with somebody with cerebral palsy unless I've written it. That's out there killing people or whatever it is, being a horror character. But we exist and we're out there. So yeah, that's where it definitely comes from for me. It's a huge part of my life. It's hard not to write about it, and I think disability fiction should exist.
So, what are you hoping that readers are going to get out of reading your stories, especially when you're writing something like horror versus writing a story trying to, normalize, I guess, somebody with a disability into like these kind of tropey stories? You're actually going the other way, really extreme. So, what are you hoping a reader's going to get out of reading your story with those characters?
It's a tough one. I mean, I know what it's like. So I mean, honestly, for anybody that's and you see the cover there, DarkTrees, I actually switched it for the final release, so it's gonna be harder to probably see there, but it's black, the white now, and it's a double feature, so it's got 2 covers. So both of these are disability fiction, and it's not pretty. I mean, they're not heroes really because they're beaten down and they're taken advantage of because that's what it's been like in my life. My parents couldn't handle having a kid with a disability with cerebral palsy. I couldn't handle having it growing up, so I threw tantrums and flipped out and became angry because I was getting picked on at school. I learned I had to lash out. I had to fight. I hung out with kids who like to fuck off and get in trouble. I mean, I had friends, but just because you have friends, I mean, any boys will tell you a lot of times because you have friends, you get picked on more. Your friends are really mean to each other. And I was always the smaller disabled kid, so it was easier, to get picked on and then turn it around for people who weren't my friends. So yeah, these characters are. It's not like a happy horror story where they're. I mean, I have one where they're getting revenge, but what's coming out, DarkTrees and Worthless Eaters, it's not. It's the reality of having a disability and being mistreated. So the characters are called crippled, they're called retarded, they're called gimp because these are things I was always called, and it spills into my life still to this day. So it's tough because what I want to paint is the real picture, and that's not usually pretty. And so, but it definitely makes for a darker story, and it's truthful.
Do you think there's elements of when you're writing this kind of extreme horror with these characters that are getting revenge that you're externalizing maybe internal rage that you've carried through your life for how you were treated?
Does that come from a place of because it's the answer better
I
than
don't know
anybody?
you.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's definitely a way of like of getting that shit out. I mean, it's a lot to unpack and it's a lot to get out, and that's kind of where DZ all came from. Like I wanted to get darker with it. My first 2 stories under my name. Well, my first one gets into disability a little bit, but um, it's not dark horror, and even starting out with DarkTrees and Worthless Leader, it's still hitting that surface of not extreme, not splatterpunk. Um, I wanted to come out with something that I felt was a little bit more digestible for the everyday horror reader. That's not like, oh, I don't want to hear that. Although it's a lot of a child abuse because unfortunately that's a lot of times where it starts with disabled people. It starts at home or it starts at being a kid. That's the brunt of it there. Hopefully you don't catch it as an adult. I unfortunately am can't talk much about it, but that's a reality right now. But I will say in this, there is payback. I always try to have that sort of element, and there's humor. I always try to bring some sort of element of humor in there, make it comedy at some point when it's dark and depressing. That's at least you know slip a joke in there. So
yeah, and Anita said writing horror is great therapy for those inner demons. And I think, I think all of us as writers, especially, we tend to write out those inner demons, but especially horror allows you kind of to get that revenge that maybe you didn't get to have growing up. Do you find that in your writing?
yeah, absolutely. And like I said, with DarkTrees coming out and Worthless Leaders, there's definitely Worthless Leaders. That's the second story, and I will say that's actually getting into Nazis. Right before the Holocaust, the Nazis actually started with disabled people. They were actually pulling babies, would have been like me, out of the hospital and just bludgeoning them and gassing them, and then moving to toddlers and kids, and literally taking kids away by the 100,000s and moving that into adults. So, and I didn't even know this till recently. I'll be honest. It was, for me, it was kind of like I wanted to do something historical. And I was like, what's the worst thing disabled people have been through? And I was like, holy shit, Hitler actually started with people with disabilities first. So yeah, that's where this one starts, and it's based on history. I even quote Hitler in here a good bit, and some of the shitty things that he said. But yeah, there's definitely revenge in this one, without a doubt, without giving it too much away. But it's definitely still rooted in reality.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people don't know that history about Hitler and about disabled people. I mean, I've heard it, obviously from you, and then I think one other person, but I think a lot of people don't realize, that history as well. And I think that's important to expose, especially in the times that we're living in now with the removal of the DEI, which is, diversity, and inclusion. It is something that we're kind of facing again. And is that something that within your writing that you hope to expose or that you have concerns about within your everyday life?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's not gotten better. I've always said that, back when I used to be a sponsored athlete through disc golf, and I did that very actively, and I was adamant about that then. Like, there's just not, it's never, there's no progression. However, wherever you look at it for disabled people, I mean, if we want to break it down, I can't speak for other disabilities, but I can speak for people with cerebral palsy like me who can walk or not in a wheelchair, and the only fucking thing I've seen is the kid in Breaking Bad. I mean, that's it. One character. There was a TV show that's the comedy that had a kid with CP in it too, but I can't think of it. But if we're breaking it down to what people know, it's the son in Breaking Bad. He has cerebral palsy. It's about as main as we get, and it's unfortunate. So that's why DZ's here to fuck some shit up, and it'll just get more demented as the releases come. So
yeah, and let's talk a little bit
yeah,
about
we're not getting any better. So that's
yeah.
why it's here.
And let's talk a little bit about, when they do have people on TV with a disability, quite often they fall into kind of like the trope where they are their disability versus them being a person with a disability. Do you agree with that? And is that something that you're trying to change?
Yeah, I mean, it's done sometimes in the right way. It's obviously done a lot of times in the bad way. I always say when people talk about it in Hollywood and acting, and he's definitely not the greatest person, but DiCaprio playing Gilbert Grape, and that is, he nailed it, and that's what acting should be. It's somebody who doesn't have a mental illness who acts it so incredibly well that they're really tapping into what it's like for that person to be that way. But that's few and far between. And that's always been a movie that I've used it as a good Hollywood reference. As far as what I've gone through, yeah, I mean, you're going to have like some sort of, joke. It's usually going to be a joke, but it's still not represented in Hollywood. Josh Blue did a great job as a comedian, 20 years ago, whenever it was when he came out. And doing that and doing it, what it was like. And even people were like thinking he's exploiting what he's doing, but it's his life. Like, how can you exploit who you are?
Yeah, and for those that don't know, Josh Blue won Last Comic Standing and then went on to have a comic career, and he has cerebral palsy, and he definitely, talks about it openly in his act, even to the point of making fun of himself. But when he does, at least my perception is when he does that, he's actually trying to mirror how people act towards him and then use that as a kind of exposing, for those that don't know Josh Blue. So he's amazing, very funny. So All right. So let's talk about your
Yeah,
first
so
book.
it's few and far between in Hollywood.
Yeah. Let's talk about your first book, The Nomad. Um, I have read it. It's a great book. It's more of a kind of a folklore horror. It's not necessarily heavily on horror, but it's more of like that folklore. But then one of the main characters has a disability. So talk a little bit about that book and what your inspiration was for writing it.
Yeah, so The Nomad was written under my real name, Justin Sexton. So I wrote that as my first novella that came out last year, and it was a way of definitely tapping into that. The character has an arm, missing an arm, so they had to have their arm cut off. But yeah, it gets into folklore, and it definitely gets into the spirit. It's about a couple siblings that are basically moving through the Appalachia in Dahlonega, where we live, where it's where the gold rush actually started before everybody went to California. So that was kind of the basis of that idea. And they find some, buried gold and kind of get sent on their journey there. But the siblings are, brother and sister, and the brother's the one missing an arm, and he's just, it goes through how much he changed after having to have his arm severed, and you know how much stronger his sister is because she's not in that situation. Her ability to hunt, use a bow, all these kind of things. So yeah, it definitely gets into that what that struggle's like, and how he has to depend on her to survive while they're basically being chased after because their you know parents have been slaughtered. Honestly, this one gets into natives. I try to make it not really seem like they're native, but I will say my mindset on that was that they were native, but I presented in a way that they are feral people being chased out into the woods. So yeah, it's coming from that. Okay, we've got people at us. How do we survive? Just the two of us, and I'm missing an arm. I can't hunt like you can. Use a bow. So that one gets in that, but it weaves in tons of folklore, lots of mysticism. Definitely gets into horror a little bit. There's some cannibalism, um, you know, uh, creatures, things that have to do with North Georgia folklore that actually are based around the area. So yeah, that was really me just kind of diving into writing. It's a little more heartfelt than what I'm writing right now. And then it was kind of opening the door of accessing, the demons that are in there and wanting to pull them out. So it was really just a stepping stone, and it really got the ball rolling for me for writing after years of writing, but just deleting so much stuff. It was finally nice to put something out.
Yeah, and Joe says the problem is there are no degrees or variables when it comes to disabled portrayals. They always pull to the extreme. And I think, we saw that a lot, not just with disability, but I think we did see that a lot with any kind of minorities for a really long time. And then slowly you've kind of seen that shift. But, having talked to other people with disabilities, they still feel like this is the one area that Hollywood has not caught up with. Do you feel that way?
Yeah, I definitely do. I mean, yeah, I would love to see. I mean, I would love to see one of the books that I'm sitting on right now because it's just different. It's a slasher it's like I said, the slasher is somebody with cerebral palsy that has a hook for a hand, and he's getting revenge on everybody that picked on him when he was a kid, and he fucking slaughters them, and it's splatterpunk, and it's really brutal. And I would love to see that something like that in Hollywood. Like I would love to see a character that's like I was growing up, um, getting that revenge and doing that shit and fucking gutting people and making it bloody and gory. I would love it. It would be awesome. And maybe it's only because I would relate to it, and I don't know if other people would. I'd hope they would. I mean, people like a good story. I don't think they really give a shit if the character. I mean, hell, he had a hook, and you know what you did last summer, but it wasn't even his hand. He was just like holding a hook. Come on, we need a guy with an actual hook. So not, but just not just Buster for the sake of Buster Blue. Come on.
What I love about this is that you've literally taken the whole, inspirational disabled person and blown it out of the water to show who you truly are. And I think a lot of people need to be aware of that because a lot of people like to look at somebody with a disability as an inspiration to them, but in the wrong ways. And so I love that what you're saying is, yeah, I'm going to slash you instead. So talk a little bit about why you did that and really how you feel about that whole kind of inspirational disabled person.
Yeah, I mean, I just want it to be realistic. That's really what it comes down to. I mean, I want it to just be real, to be down to what the situation's actually like. And I'm just easing myself into that. I mean, that's kind of with DarkTrees is coming out. It's a dramatized, exacerbated version of my childhood. You know, I don't give a shit. I said my real name on here, and I'll say it now. But my parents locked me in my room when I was a kid. I didn't know that that was wrong until, you know, basically about 17. Then they turned the knob back around, and I was like, oh, it's not normal for your parents to get mad at you or for you to get a D and have, you know, your doorknob turned around by your mother, too, of all people, so they could lock you in there and you have to ask to go to the bathroom. So I was actually driving past this old dilapidated cabin in Delanago that's just it's sunk into the ground almost, and it was raining and it was early in the morning and it was foggy as shit. And I just saw this like creature just hovering over this cabin in the woods, and he was looking over this kid in a wheelchair, and it was what I imagined being locked in the room like, you know, but just to the extreme. What if I was in a wheelchair? What if I couldn't speak? I was nonverbal, and my parents were abusive. I lived way the fuck out in the middle of nowhere. I was in the wilderness, and no one can help me. And this was before the news broke here, and he's not disabled. You know, I mean, the guy who was so sadly locked in his house for 30 years by his stepmother and his father and his stepsisters or whatever, and that's the kind of horror that I was thinking of, because there are people out there going through it, and there probably is a kid out there in a wheelchair who's nonverbal, whose mom's doing shit like that to him, or his dad's doing shit to him, like his grandma or his brother, you know, or they're older and they're old people. It happens to old people. Shit, there's old people who live their own fucking life, not disabled, get in a wheelchair, then they go to a nursing home or they go, and who knows where they just wheeled into a closet and fucking then wheeled out. Oh, grandpa hasn't been in the closet all month. He's just, you know, but he has been. So that's kind of where that came from of, you know, showing the resentment, because that's the key. That's what people don't get, is the resentment that comes from family and the people around somebody with a disability, because it's hard on them. I mean, my mom would always say it's so hard on her. It's so hard on her. My dad would say, oh, it was always hard on them. Like, oh, you're so difficult. Like, why can't you just, oh, you know, like, yeah, I couldn't even, you know, I was chasing my friends because I couldn't ride a bike. Um, so yeah, and that's what I want to get right now. And once that message out, then we'll get to the kind of bullshit, which is the hero aspect of really slashing and killing and all that, because that's not reality. It's fantasy.
Right. Yeah, I think most people that are dealing with that don't have that like kind of end revenge. They just deal with a lot of shit and get shit on their whole lives. And so that, you know, it is somewhat, I'm sure, therapeutic for you to be able to write about it and have that revenge sequence. But yeah, a lot of people don't have that outlet. All right. So
Yeah,
we're
and
going
it's
to,
having the outlets. I mean, it's nice.
yeah, I was saying, let's switch gears a little bit. I want to talk about one of the questions I ask my guests is who is somebody that either was like that first hero to you, or that first person that you felt got you as a person, and how did they do that?
Well, if we're gonna get into horror writing and where it came from, I mean, I'm gonna be 40 this year. So, to quote a Jeopardy joke I heard on Celebrity Jeopardy, a woman say, she answered a question. I'm 40 years old and I'm married to a white male, so I know who Corey Taylor is. So yeah, I'll give it to Corey Taylor, Slipknot. His angst, and I was really fucking pissed off, and that music was dark and his lyrics were dark and it was horror, and it was about people being buried in a box or buried underground and suffering and struggling, and it inspired me, and we had to write a play in drama class I'll never forget, and we were going to act them out. She was going to pick two to act out, and we all had, it was like 12 of us, 14 kids, we all had to write a play, and I was just obsessed with Slipknot the first time, and I wrote this fucking dark shit, like sleep paralysis, surgery being done on this kid, like what it would go. And I stayed up all night writing, and I just remember being so fired. And then I was like, oh no, what if I get like trouble? What if he calls my parents? What if you mess with, like, this kid's deranged? But I got an A, and she was like, loved it. Said we couldn't do it in class; it was too dark. But yeah, I mean, for me, that was like it was, you know, like Corey Taylor and Slipknot, hearing somebody write about killing people and in getting it out, and then we didn't know what he looked like. He had a mask on his head and he looked like a serial killer. So I mean, that for me was the first person. If I look at DZ Hall and where the roots come from, it definitely starts there. But to even take it further back, I mean, I was a big Goosebumps kid, so R.L. Stine was huge for me. I mean, that was really my first step into seeing that somebody could write creepy things.
Yeah, definitely. And so it's interesting that you answered the question that way, because quite often when I ask that question, my guess will give somebody that really was like inspirational to them or lifted them up, very positive type of feeling. And you went dark. But I get why you went dark, because you didn't feel heard. And so that allows you through music to feel heard, correct?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, music was a big part when it outside of writing for me. It was always or even outside of just movies and television and books, like music was always kind of number one. I mean, I play music still and did music for years, and somebody like John Carpenter is fucking badass. Somebody who comes up with ideas but then makes the soundtrack and all that shit. Like I love that. I'm inspired by that. and and yeah, my inspirations have really changed. Like as a kid, it was when I was really little, it was sports figures. I was really into Jim Abbott because of the cerebral palsy, and I pitched playing baseball, and I had to hold the glove with my right hand and throw the ball with my left hand, and fucking trying to catch it with this hand was not going to happen. So I had to do it all with one hand. And I'll never forget the first coach being like, if this ball gets hit in your face, like, can you do this? And I can do it. I've done it with a tennis ball. Let's see what happens with a baseball. And I did. So as a kid, it was, kind of sports, but the music just really changed my life. I was, 11 when Kurt Cobain was peak. Nirvana was huge. And so music was just a big part. But really seeing like lyrics and like connecting, like Corey Taylor and Slipknot, like that was a big thing. Deftones. I mean, I'm sitting here wearing the Deftones shirt, talking about Corey Taylor, and I should, mention the Deftones for just absolutely, having that grunge intense sound that came out early on, where it was dark and, fucking just having that sound that was haunting and more breathy. So music was always huge, and it was always shaping who I was. I mean, I think being a '90s kid was cool because you had so much going on at one time with music and art and books and movies, and it was just so much to take in. It definitely shaped, who I am now, for real. But now I find a lot more in older stuff.
Yeah. So that kind of brings me to a question I was going to ask anyway, which is you're also a musician. You're also an artist too. But I know you pretty heavily split your time between writing and music. What are some of the parallels between writing and music, and how do you feel like they kind of feed into each other?
Yeah, I mean, mood's a big part and big thing for me. I like mood and music. Most of my music doesn't have lyrics, so that mood that I get in writing comes through, in the music, and I do a lot of different stuff. Sometimes it's just a good balance. Like I wake up and I kind of know what the day feels like. Is it a music day? Like, is writing going to be something? I don't force writing. Is today going to be a music day? And I can jump into music, and I forced music for a really long time. For 15 years, I was putting my foot to the grind, trying to get myself out there. You know how it was. I had a lot of failed movie. I was trying to get in the movie film soundtrack deal, and I had stuff that got there so many times and then failed. Signed with GoPro right before they went under. I was gonna be in their new film media stuff, putting my music. They were gonna be putting my shit in commercials. They went under, like, probably because they signed a contract with me and my shitty luck. So
All right. I don't think that's true, but okay, well, let's move on from that. So, with your writing moving forward, is this something that you think you're going to continue to use as a platform for disabled characters? Do you think it's something that you'll just continue to use characters as they are? So, for example, I write disabled characters, but I write them because we live in a world where people have disabilities. We live in a world where people are gay. We live in a world of different cultures. So I try to weave those in. What is your goal moving forward with writing your characters?
well, I don't want to pigeonhole myself as just a disabled writer, so I'm going to try to stagger them out like every other kind of release kind of thing. But eventually I will stop having, I think I'll have said my piece, I feel like. Because I have so much written. I mean, I have 4 novellas and 2 novels sitting on the back burner right now. Just working my way to that point. So yeah, eventually it'll stop. I mean, probably even by the end of next year, I will have had everything out in the disability realm that I feel like I will have said. I don't want to repeat myself. Now, does that mean that, you know, a side minor character might have it? That might happen. But as far as your main characters and the drive of that, yeah, it'll probably come to an end by next year after I've put all this shit out. And I'll have said what I've wanted to say, I feel like.
And as a reader, what are you hoping to see, I guess, in what other people write? Or, you know, like, do you find when you're reading other people's work that you find representation for disabled characters, or do you feel like that needs to be
Yeah.
like more focused on?
Yeah, definitely. I definitely think it needs to be more focused on. I mean, you're good at it, you know, but you're different than most people. He smells bad, but I'll give a shout out to Duncan Ralston for giving it. He in his first book, Salvage, he gives a shout out. He's got a character with Down syndrome, and he does it right, and he does it realistic, and you know it's done to where this is not, you know, somebody trying to glorify it. So that was cool. That's one I really think of. So shout out to Duncan and Salvage yeah, Salvage is the book, and that's his first one too. So if you know Duncan from Womb and other stuff, but check out Salvage because that one he does a good job with a character with Down syndrome in that book. Trying to think of stuff I've kind of read, or I mean, I want to see more of it from other people for sure. That would be kind of cool. And I understand people holding back. I mean, it's weird for me. Like I haven't, you know, I just wrote a short story that kind of got into like, you know, racism and how black people are treated and stuff. And that was, I kind of mentioned it, you know what I mean? But I don't really know. I don't know what that's like. I know what my friends have told me. So that's what I could pull from. I pull from actual memories of them telling me what they've gone through. Because all I know is being a stupid white fucking kid with, you know, a disability. So it's the same shit for me all the time. You know, when you're just a regular white kid, but you know, a lot of times they don't have too much to throw. You're fat. You know, everybody will look for something. Oh, you're too skinny, or your ribs stick out. You know, and then it's all people when you're younger go for whatever they can. So I would like to see other people represent, but I know what it's like to be like, I don't know. You know, I haven't represented too many. You know, I don't have characters that are getting into what it's like for a. You know, I've had super friends just that were so gay they told me everything that it was like for them to be what they went through, and a lot of times it was worse than what I went through, and a lot of times it was the same. And I've written stuff, and a lot of that stuff doesn't get released because I'm not comfortable with how I represented that. So it's like a double-edged sword. I can see why people are like, I don't really represent that because I don't know. It takes somebody who's able to be like, I don't give a shit. This is the character. I'm doing it. And I'm learning to get there. I'm learning to get there. I think we'd all love to live in a world where the character's not, you know, you don't have to point it out. You know, this character's white, this character's black, this character's Mexican, this character's gay, this character's transgender, this character's, you know, they're just Bob, Sue, Steve. Well, hopefully they're not those names, but, you know, something better than that. But that's the world we live in. So it's tough too, you know, especially in a world where a lot of shit's getting canceled and people are always looking to call out some author for whatever shit they're, you know, oh, this. So it's touchy for sure.
Yeah, I agree. And I think this is definitely a conversation that, sorry, palms getting to me, that I've had in, you know, on panels and stuff too, which is the, you know, diversity kind of thing. And so I guess I had done a panel at Multiverse last year, which I really enjoyed, which was getting into diversity, and it was appropriation versus appreciation. And one of the things we talked about was intent. Like when somebody, their intent for writing a character, maybe not to create a stereotype or a trope, but rather to show them as a real person. And naturally the skill, and we got into sensitivity readers as well, which is when you reach out to somebody who does have the thing that you don't have and say, hey, could you look at this, and make sure I didn't kind of cross over. So as a person who's living with a disability, is this something where you want to see people, even without disabilities, bringing these characters in? And if so, how would you like them to approach it so that they are sensitive to what you're going through?
I mean, I think the good thing is just talk to somebody who's been like that. You did that. You wrote a book, you know, with gay characters, and you're not gay, but you had your gay friends read through it, make sure you represented it properly. They gave you the thumbs up. Same with when you did a character that was deaf and sign language. You can always just say, hey, Justin, does this representation feel good, or do you feel like I did a shit job? I'll be honest. I'll always let someone know. So I think that's a good step. You could always find somebody that's been through that. I mean, I the first thing that I will put out that's not out yet, but the next thing that'll come out that will be pushing that boundary for me and getting out of my comfort zone of writing what I know and my own abuse, and that's getting into women and how much women are abused. And let's face it, women are definitely more of a subject of being targeted for violence than men are. So when this is done and I want it read first, I want a woman to read it and say, hey, this is okay. Yes, I understand this is dark, but let's make sure that this is got the proper commentary, because that's what I feel like it comes down to when you're getting into things like this. And I struggle with this because, like, if I'm writing about if this sentence is about a character that's brutal, I'm writing from that perspective, so it comes out brutal. It may not come out as somebody who's caring. I have to deliver this commentary afterwards to soften the blow. So it's tough. I mean, especially, and this is new territory for me because I've been writing for 20 years, and now I'm only a year into showing people my work, and I'm only just now scratching the surface of having people read my stuff. That's really extreme because I was afraid of this for so long, and that is also where the pen name came from. I didn't want to write this shit under my real name. You know?
Yeah. So have you gotten feedback from readers or even buyers? Like if somebody comes up to a table or an event and find out that you use representation in your stories, do you get feedback, and what kind of feedback are you getting about that?
I've gotten little. I mean, from people like me, for sure, I haven't gotten any. But I mean, people have just said they connect to the story. I think Nomad especially was the one where, because I haven't. DZ Hall's about to have a lot of stuff coming out here in the next week. But yeah, I mean, with the Nomad, I heard some, but it's more of like the heartfeltness that kind of came from that story. So, and that's kind of the goal here over these next few months, because I've got a lot coming out. I got DarkTrees. I got Glob Bunny. Got to give a shout out that that's just me having fun and writing a good old fun stoner horror story that comes out Friday, and then I'm back 2 weeks later with DarkTrees on the 18th, and that's really getting into the true representation and shit that I want. So hopefully then we'll see what kind of feedback I get. Maybe people don't give a shit and they'll be like, I don't want to read about it, that. But I think people will, and I'm interested to see how it goes.
So what's Glob Bunny about?
Glob Bunny. So Glob Bunny is out Friday, and it is completely unlike anything I've written. Christmas time, I wanted to give a shot at just kind of doing something fun and quirky, holiday horror. And I saw Easter and 420 were on the same day this year. And I like to smoke. I think it was a cat fight in our house. So anyways, so Glob Bunny is about not cleaning your bong and what happens when you don't clean your bong. And all that resin gunk takes over and births into the Easter Bunny. And the Easter Bunny has these goblin kind of resiny friends, and they've been through hell, and you get to hear their backstory. And then they have the idea on 420 in Easter Sunday to make some nice potent edibles to just kind of wipe out everybody in America. And then so that's kind of what happens. But it's fun. It's a dark comedy. I've been saying it's Gremlins meets Grandma's Boy. It's good old stoner horror, which is something I'd like to see. We're not getting enough. We're sitting here talking about disabled people. Stoners are not getting enough representation in horror.
Yeah, I don't know if that's true. I feel like I definitely read horror with stoners, but But fair enough. I mean, you got to have what you got to have. So currently you have out 2 novellas. You're in 2 anthologies, an upcoming anthology, and then you have these 2 books coming out. Is that correct?
Yeah, so here's the rundown if anybody is interested. I've put books out as Justin Sexton. You can look these up. The Nomad, that's folklore, gets into some disability fiction. It's a little more heartfelt, but it's got some good darkness. It's a really good fucking book. It's a good page turner. And then I have Mirror Island, which is a 90s nostalgia, just throwback to the 90s slasher, a little bit I Know What You Did Last Summer vibes with a good twist. That one I've gotten a lot of feedback on just the twist being really good at the end on that one. So if you like twists and slashers, that one's good. And that one's not extreme. And then you did the Final Passenger one, and I've got a story as Justin Sexton in there. And that one's cool. It's like Dick Tracy meets Amityville Horror. And so that one was kind of fun. And then so for DZ Hollow, you just came out with on Above the Rain, the Devour the Rich, and that was my first DZ Hollow story. And that gets into a character with Down syndrome in West Virginia in the coal mines, getting bullied and beat up by the family, like a kid whose family, owns the coal mine, and the rich kind of kids around town, and he does get his revenge on that one. So if you like trains, and it's got a little bit of this kind of Stephen King-ish kind of vibe to it. That one came out on Devour the Rich, and then Glob Bunny's out on Friday. If anybody wants to find me on Facebook and message me, I will send you an ARC. This one's only an ebook. It's a novelette, just a good old stoner comedy. And then DarkTrees, Worthless Eaters, a double creature feature, 2 novellas, is out on April 18th. So big month for DZ Hollow for April. Finally getting stuff out there. Boom Bap, Glob Bunny, DarkTrees, and Worthless Eaters, the double creature feature. So
Nice. And what is your music under?
I make music as 22 and 8. It's just the number 22 and the and symbol, and you can go on Bandcamp. All my music is only on Bandcamp there, so you can go to Bandcamp 22 and 8, and there's a shitload of albums, anything from kind of electronica rock to world psychedelic trippy stuff. So yeah, Glob Bunny's kind of getting into the psychedelic stuff, which I really want to see some more of that. Psychedelic horror would be really cool, and I don't just mean stoner horror, but actually like kind of getting more. So there's a lot I have definitely planned. So all sorts of funky fun stuff.
Very cool. And so do you have, for the rest of the year, do you have kind of like other books planned out, or are you kind of just working on stuff at this time?
I mean, I don't know. I just want to get DarkTrees done and get this out. Doing the double cover is a pain in the ass. It's a cool idea if anybody wants to try it. It is cool. So you've got this cover, and then you've got this cover, but just trying to get it positioned right, it's been a real pain in the ass. So that's why that one's taken a little bit, just getting it formatted. So yeah, I just really want to get this out because this has just been kind of going for a minute and go for there. But I do think my focus once that is to get a novel out. So that's the goal this summer, is to get a DZ Hollow extreme horror novel out, something that really is really pushing the boundaries and what I want to see done with this pen name. So that's the goal. I have time right now too.
Yeah, very cool. So hold on. So you have these stories that are extreme horror, and you've written kind of like that folklore creature feature. Do you think you'll stay within this kind of splatterpunk extreme horror genre, or are you kind of playing with other ideas that would branch outside of
that? Yeah, I do a little bit of everything. I mean, that's kind of the beauty with the double creature feature. DarkTrees is what I'm calling Fire in the Sky meets Pan's Labyrinth. It doesn't just follow a kid in a wheelchair. It actually starts out with loggers in the 70s. It's got that cryptid alien. So it gets into extraterrestrials and the connection between extraterrestrials and aliens and the hollow earth theory. That's something I'm really into. Not flat earth. Flat earth is fucking stupid, but hollow earth. That the earth was once hollow and there could be people inside of it and creatures inside of it. So, and with a name like DZ Hollow, Hollow is my favorite word. If anybody wants to know where that came from, I also play a lot of hollow instruments and stuff. So that's where that came from. But yeah, I want to do everything in horror. So the goal is to stagger these releases. So I'm staggering between disability horror, but also not repeating myself with alien creature features and kind of bouncing the slasher. So my goal really after DarkTrees comes out, I've gotten Glob Bunny and DarkTrees out, is to hit that novel, but something that this one's looking like it's kind of hitting that 50. The goal is 55,000 words probably in this one. And it's going to be slow burn extreme horror that really has story, a lot of story. Not that there isn't, because there's plenty that does. But me getting into that, and yeah, it's going to be dark for a while, but it's also I'm going to have stuff that is more digestible for the everyday person. I've written stuff that I'm sitting on that's kind of like DarkTrees is more alien, a little more fun horror. I like that stuff too. I've just finally figured out for the first time in my life how to access this dark shit and get it out. And so I got to get it out. I think Judith Sonnet said it best, where she's not even reading or writing extreme horror splatterpunk anymore. She got it out of her system, and there is some of us that have to get it out because of what we've gone through. And that's kind of where I'm at right now. And like you tell me, I'm in a midlife crisis. So it's all sorts of shit to get out.
Well, you are, but we can move on from that. So here's a question about your writing style and your writing process. Do you consider yourself somebody that plans out a story and then writes it, or do you kind of have a few ideas and then you just see where it goes?
I plan stuff out a little bit. I start on my phone, so everything is a note in the phone first, and how much notes I have really will dictate where that's going. But yeah, it always starts on the phone, and I have to have something outlined, at least a good chunk of stuff. If I'm going to start a novella or a story, I've got to have, like we said, I call it the triangle, where you got to have a triangle, and each corner has a plot, a storyline in it, and weave them all together in a sense, and develop it into a book. But I haven't released a novel yet under any of the pen names. So once DarkTrees is out, that's the goal, is to show that I can write a longer book and and do that, because it's a completely different beast. And then that's actually going to be tapping a lot more into reality and not having any element of supernaturalness. A little bit of supernaturalness from getting fucked up in drugs, but I don't want to just do supernatural. I want to have horror that's real, because that's what scares me. So coming up, I'll have stuff that gets into what scares me. Just wait till the summer.
Yeah, I probably won't read that because I don't like the real stuff. I'm much more of a supernatural horror reader, quiet horror. But yeah, I definitely respect it because I know that also comes from a place, and there's definitely a high drive for, I guess, kind of like more like not true crime, but like realistic horror. Um, do you find, and this is an honest question, do you find, so you say it comes from your own fears. So is this something that like you use to abate those fears, or just kind of share them with the world?
Jack Ketchum said, how can I write something scary if I'm not scared? And only thing that scares him is people and reality and like real shit, he said, not supernatural stuff. And there's a lot of truth to that. When I was a kid, I was terrified of supernaturalness. Like my first fear was ET. I was so fucking scared of ET. Grandmother got me an ET like figure, and it was in the closet, and I still was scared of ET. And I was terrified of Ghostbusters, and I was terrified of. I mean, my cousin was a year younger than me, and we would go in Boston and Worcester to the movie store, and his dad would be like, "What movies you guys want to get?" And my cousin would go, "Freddy Krueger. Can I get Freddy Krueger?" And it was like we were watching Freddy Krueger, Jason and Chucky at 8, 9 years old, and that was the scariest shit ever. I watched Friday the 13th. Excuse me. I watched Nightmare on Elm Street on a waterbed for the first time. Yeah, my cousin had a waterbed. So when Johnny Depp gets gutted through the waterbed, I went to bed that night at 9 years old on a waterbed, and I fucking was terrified. So supernatural stuff scared me younger, and I saw a UFO when I was sober. Let's point that out, and that scared me. That was fucking weird. So I was really freaked out by aliens as a kid. That was like one of my biggest fears. I literally was so scared as a kid about aliens. Like, they could read my brainwaves. I was convinced, well, if they can fly or fucking from planet to planet, clearly they can read my brainwaves. So I would lose sleep, and then my dad wouldn't help me out. I'd be like, Dad, what do you think? I mean, it might be possible. And then we watch Unsolved Mysteries, and fucking hell yeah, it's possible. So that stuff scared me as a kid. But I mean, like Ketchum said, you get older and people are scary, and that's what scares me. So yeah, I definitely want to tap into writing things that scare me. And you see that in my stuff. Snakes are a big phobia of mine. I'm not scared of spiders, love spiders, but in my shit, I don't like poisonous snakes. So there's gonna be copperheads and timber rattlers, things like that.
Yeah, definitely snakes were one of the first things I learned that you were scared of. So I'll be the one to remove snakes from the house if that has to happen.
If they're not poisonous, I'm fine. But copperheads, I live in Georgia, man, in the mountains. Copperheads, that's what I'm talking about. I've had a copperhead near my junk before.
Okay,
Not
elaborate
by
on that.
choice. I was playing disc golf once, and I went to when I was like 16, and I reached down into like a drainage ditch where my disc was, and there was a copperhead literally in my lap, like right near it, and yeah, it was terrifying. I don't like them. That's my fear. So.
And Anita says she doesn't like snakes either, poisonous or not. I don't like the poisonous ones, but I don't mind the non-poisonous ones. But
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, I don't get that close to tail. Most times I just avoid them in general. So tapping into fears is so kind of what we talked about here. We tapped into fears, but you've also tapped into real life experience. And I think that's really brought together a unique perspective in horror, because we do tend to see similar things repeated in horror. And what you're bringing is kind of a completely different idea. And I think that's important, to show that representation, but also to share your own personal experience through those stories. I like the revenge aspect. I think that's really cool as well. All right, so we're getting close to wrapping up. Why don't you tell everybody a little bit again about your books, where they can find your books, and then any events you might have coming up.
All right, if you want to find some Justin Sexton, my first bit, you can go on Amazon and find The Nomad or Mirror Island. I think they're also available on the Above the Ring Collective website. You can get signed copies from me. And then if you want the new DZ Hollow stuff, since Justin Sexton's disappearing into the abyss for a while, you can find me on Facebook. Just look up DZ Hollow. I know I'm the only one. And I will send you a copy of Glob Bunny, or you can wait until Friday when it's out. And then DarkTrees is out on April 18th. And then we'll go from there. I also have some short story coming out, but I'm not going to talk about that yet. Wait till get some news, but there's a cool splatterpunk horror story anthology coming out this summer, so with a lot of good authors in it. So look out for that.
And what about any upcoming events?
Oh yeah, I'm going to be at Terrapin Brewing this weekend, and I'm going to read from either DarkTrees or Glob Bunny, depending on the crowd. So if you are in Athens, Georgia, or in Georgia in general, and you want to go near Terrapin Brewing, I'll be selling books. I was hoping to have copies of DarkTrees. I don't think it's going to happen, but I'm going to have a QR code that goes immediately to the EPUB of Glob Bunny, and I'll be reading from one of those at Terrapin. So, and then can you tell me what else I have coming up? Because you know, and I don't.
Okay, well, first, what's at Terrapin this weekend is on Saturday, starting at 3, and it's Haunt Fest. So it's all kind of haunt and horror themed, a lot of fun things. So it's got authors, it's going to have some creepy kind of vendors. And then, like last year, they had like the Ghostbusters vehicle and the thing from the thing, music and stuff like that. So a lot of fun. Some of the other things we have coming up is the Conyers Book Fest on April 19th in Conyers, Georgia, outside the bookseller. And then I know in May, there's the Butterfly Bash here in Dahlonega at the Butterfly Farm, and that's Mother's Day weekend, the whole weekend. So quite a few events, and there's sure to be more coming up as well. I would like to sort of end this with you maybe kind of telling people, since you have a unique voice, and I know a lot of times you feel like that voice isn't heard, what would you like people to know about what it's like to be somebody living with a disability and people's perception of that?
That they're probably more vulnerable than they lead on. And not everybody's understanding. So if you're understanding, doesn't mean that everybody else is. And some people like to talk about, I mean, I've been stopped in public by people who want to talk to me about my confidence level. Oh, you're so confident, and my cousin has it, or my grandson hasn't done. So, I mean, it's tough. I just want people to know that, a lot of times people with disabilities have been through a lot of shit, and a lot of times they don't have family members that actually understand. A lot of people assume that people with disabilities do, and they don't. So, just like everybody else, and the same shit happens. Just a lot of times you got to add to it, and if it's a physical disability and even mental disabilities, a lot of that shit gets worse with age. So, a lot of times your friends that are in those situations get old, are struggling, and it doesn't mean you're born with it. There's people MS and things happen late in life, so it can happen to anybody. Hopefully it happens to all these rich fucking billionaires, because I'd love to see them get crippled. So Elon Musk, if you're out there, I'll fight you, motherfucker. Let's do that. That'd be a cool fight. So I mean, you just give me $5 million. That's all it's so.
And I have to say, as somebody who had a child with a disability, and I'm married to somebody with a disability, one of the things I always try to express is like, and we do, and I've talked about this, is that because somebody has a disability and maybe they can't speak as well, or it takes them a little bit longer to things, doesn't mean they're stupid. Like, I can't express that enough. Justin, or DZ, Justin, is one of the most intelligent people I've ever met. So, like, honestly,
I'm fucking stupid.
Well, sometimes yes, but when you're not being stupid, you're incredibly intelligent. And I think that was a thing too that I'd like to express, is that, obviously through DZ's writing and his music, you can see this intelligence and this creativity. And that's something I think that people need to really be aware of as well. We're actually at time to wrap up. So I'd like to thank everybody for tuning in tonight. We really appreciate you listening to our chat. This will be available to watch after tonight as well. So if you want to watch it later, share it. We'd really appreciate it. And again, thank you so much for coming on and talking about yourself. I know there were some vulnerable moments in there, but if you're going to talk to me, you're going to hear it. So it's just how it is. But we appreciate you coming on and speaking with us tonight.
I got one more thing to say. Glob Bunny comes out on April 4th. It's about the Easter Bunny. He's a stoner. People don't know this. The Easter Bunny's favorite band is Limp Bizkit. Michael Keaton is the best Batman.
Michael Keaton is the best Batman. And on that note, we'll go ahead and wrap up. And we just want to remind everybody that it's always time for Go Indie Now.